That song we sang, when Andy was playing it, it's funny, we did it in the first service, and I loved it. I know it's a hard song to play. And when I heard her playing that at the beginning, I thought, in fact, I said, honey, can we sing that song? Are you confident enough to play that? Because it's a tough one to play. That song, Here Am I, Lord, was a song that God used in my life to really solidify His call to ministry. When I sang that song and I realized that I could answer that, and I didn't have to rely on my own ability, I would just be willing to be willing and able, and He would take care of the rest. God used that song in that way. Here I am. I don't have to know the details. Can I tell you something? I've told you before. If I had known, if He had laid out for me, He said, I'm calling you to ministry, here's the next 20 years of your life in detail, I would have said, no way. But now, 20 years later, looking back, I wouldn't trade any of it. I wouldn't trade the hardships. I wouldn't trade the trials. I wouldn't trade the day that we were looking, my wife and I, we were down in Florida, and in our cupboard, all we had was one can of pork and beans to feed the two of us and our two children, and that was it. You think, man, I would never want to go through that. If I knew it was up ahead, I would try to avoid it. But having gone through it, I wouldn't trade it. God leads us step by step. If we'll say, here I am, He'll take us to remarkable things. He'll help us to see unbelievable sights if we'll just simply answer the call. Moses said, here I am, not knowing, no idea what was going to come next. But he was willing. Are you willing? Perhaps in order for God to get our attention, perhaps in order for us to really hear from God, one of the first things is we've got to be willing. We've got to be willing to say, here I am. No matter what it is, if I'm walking with you, Lord, I know it's going to be okay. I will commit my way to the Lord, and I will trust Him, and He will do it. Psalm 37:5. Are you willing and able to say, here I am? Well, the next thing God does is He identifies Himself. He says, Moses, take off your sandals, for the place in which you're standing is holy ground. He was setting up for Moses to understand this was going to be life-changing. What he was about to encounter, what was about to happen in his life, nothing was ever going to be the same. Because would it be sensible to take your sandals off in the wilderness? When you're out there with the rocks and everything else? No. It didn't make sense, but God was saying, things may not make sense, but you can trust me. The next thing He says is, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Now, over and over again, God identifies Himself in that way. Was that important? Would that be important for Moses? After all, really, how long had it been since Jacob had been alive? Over 400 years. Remember, they've been enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. 400 years had passed since Joseph. Pharaohs had risen up that didn't know Joseph and enslaved the people. Would it matter then? Or was that irrelevant? Can I tell you something? It will never be irrelevant. It's not irrelevant to us. You say, well, we're a New Testament church. Aren't you glad, though? He's still the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. The one, the only one true God. His name is Yahweh. His name is Elohim. He is the one, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, the God of our people, and we are His people. He identifies Himself, and immediately Moses' response is interesting. Moses hides his face because he is afraid to look on the Lord. He's afraid to look on God. You know, I think we could learn some things from that. I think if we would understand what it means to approach God in worship. In Ecclesiastes 5, I'm just going to read this. I don't want you to look it up right now, but you might want to write this down. Ecclesiastes 5, 1-2 says this, guard your steps as you go to the house of God. Draw near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know they're doing evil. Do not be hasty in word or impulsive in thought to bring a matter up in the presence of God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Therefore, let your words be few. What the writer is telling us and urging us to do is don't let familiarity breed contempt, as it often does. We ought never to come to God and say, what's up, bro? Now, understand this. He is the brother. He is the friend that sticks closer than any brother. He is the friend of sinners. He is your Abba Father, which loosely translated would be the same as saying Daddy. He is all of those things and intimately connected with us, but He is never off the throne. He is always God. He is always enthroned in majesty. And we ought to approach Him not just as some Joe on the street, but as though we were guests coming into the presence of the King, invited by Him. And we would honor Him, and we would show Him reverence. We're missing a lot of that. All of us collectively, and I don't mean to be pointing any fingers, myself as well, where we have allowed familiarity, where we have allowed our intimate relationship with Him to sort of breed this kind of informality that comes. You know what happens in marriage? When you're first dating, when you're first getting hooked up, fellas, you open the door for your wife, right? Open up the car door, and then you close it real soft so that it doesn't pop her little eardrums or anything. You're treating her with great respect. Now, man, if she's got one foot in the car, you're on the road. She better get that other one in and shut the door. Things change over time. That time begins to sort of breed that kind of contempt. Friends, we shouldn't allow it to happen in our relationships, but certainly not with God. That's what Solomon is saying here in Ecclesiastes. Guard your steps as you approach the Lord. Come to Him with the right heart, with the right motive. Moses hears who it is and hits the ground, face down, because he's afraid in reverence and in holy fear to look upon God. Well, God identified Himself, and then God revealed the need. He had heard the cries of the people. They had His attention. We talked about that last week. Their cries had risen up, and God had heard them. And God intended to do something about it. And I'm sure that at this point Moses is going, all right, yes, I'm glad God's going to finally do something. It had been, now remember, from the time that Moses left, that's 40 years, 4 decades of time that have passed, and still nothing. And so Moses is probably really excited. All right, God, thank you for being willing to do something. Thank you for being willing to intercede on the behalf of your people. What does that have to do with me? You ever have somebody that tell you a lot of things and you wonder, I wonder why they're telling me this? Well, God goes through all of these things. Here's His plan. Here's what He's going to do. He said, and I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters. I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians. Yea, God. And to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land. He's talking about the promised land. I'm going to bring them up to that good and spacious land that He's promised. He promised them all the way back. Goes back to Abraham again. Back to Abraham, the covenant with Abraham. Then he goes on to what that land is going to be. And then verse 9, now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. I have seen the oppression which the Egyptians are oppressing them. And so Moses is thinking, God's going to do something. All right. But what Moses doesn't realize is when he said, here I am, here am I, he was also saying, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And in this case, what was it going to take? Moses. Moses was born to be the burden bearer, born to be the deliverer. Moses, in verse 10, God says to him, therefore, come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people. And remember, when in the introduction, those of you that weren't here, let me take you back a few weeks. When I was introducing this, I said one of the key elements of this is that this nation of Israel, these Hebrew people there, God will over and over and over again refer to them in this way. He will call them my people. He is setting them apart to be an unusual nation in the world, His people. And listen, by the way, we are His people. We are adopted as sons and daughters through Christ's blood. We are His people as well, and we ought to know that He will act on our behalf. He says, I want you to go to Pharaoh. You go to Egypt so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. And we're going to talk more about Moses' response to that. But we lose a lot in the translation from the Hebrew to the English. I want to just kind of give you a nutshell of what Moses' response was. Huh? You see, Moses had tried that already. If we go back and really think about what Moses was attempting to do, Moses was attempting on small scale to deliver his people, one by one. And God is saying, we're going to bring them all out. When Moses slew that Egyptian, His idea was he would deliver that slave from that beating. But did it deliver him from all of the beatings? Did it deliver anybody else from any beating?